Tim, I met a few months back in New Orleans, and he is the founder, co-founder, don't want to forget Robbie, co-founder of an organization called Idea Village, which was founded to do entrepreneurship for development in New Orleans. So it's very much similar to what Rise Egypt is trying to achieve in the sense that it has a place-based mission to develop the city of New Orleans through spurring entrepreneurship and also even tapping into the New Orleanian diaspora. So in many parallels, and Michael and I both had the pleasure of attending their entrepreneurship week, which they had a few months back, and was a great success, and they've been working now for 15 years. So we'd love to learn about the history of Idea Village and the trajectory and lessons learned for Rise. Thanks, Tim.
Well, thank you. This has been a very interesting time just to sit back in this session with you guys, because last night Mona asked me what was it like 15 years ago starting this thing. And I told her it was very hard, by the way, the idea of building entrepreneurship in New Orleans. But it actually started just like this. There's a small group of people who got together in New Orleans, and we actually found 4 or 5 entrepreneurs. And we actually did something just like this, Mona, to basically catalyze something. So thank you for inviting me here, and you were lucky to have someone like Mona driving this thing, because what you're starting here is an incredible journey. So what I would love to do is give you a little bit of why we did this, what we do, and then more importantly, some lessons over the last 15 years about how to build an entrepreneurial culture within your community. But before I begin, I'll be very clear. I am not a PhD. I have not studied entrepreneurship or how to build ecosystems. I'm not a management consultant. We don't charge for this. I'm just an entrepreneur, born and raised in New Orleans, and moved away in the mid-'80s because everyone was leaving. Our parents told us to get out. The city was going down the tubes, and came back in the late 90s and found the city in despair. So everything I'm about to tell you is just pure theory or pure experience. But the things we've seen, we have a theory here that I'd love to present and get your feedback on, because something remarkable is happening in New Orleans. But to begin with, where we are now, New Orleans is a very remarkable city right now, but in the last couple of years, it's been recognized nationally, in some cases globally, as a model city or something special going on. We've been called the blueprint for economic development, for entrepreneurship, which is a remarkable thing on the front cover of Entrepreneur Magazine for this to happen. So that would be my one challenge to you guys. I want to see Entrepreneur Magazine having you on the cover. But also, it's been called a tech startup and a hub for tech startup. We're becoming a paradise for investors and entrepreneurs. You have, we'll never have the most money, but we certainly are the coolest startup city in America, which means you can own a brand, but we've also gotten recognized as something different's happening. We've become the #1 brain magnet in the country. And this is something we talked about years ago. One day we will be, but people are flocking to New Orleans. And they're moving to New Orleans as a magnet of a city, because not only are people moving there, but the folks who moved away are starting to come home. We have now become the number 3 in information technology for jobs. People are moving there to create technology jobs. Where I think this is important, working age Americans are moving there, the #1 city in America. We're the fastest growing, and I guess there's a blog called Nerd Wallet, so you'll take any type of blogs you can get, branding you can get. We're one of the hottest startup hubs in the country. And by the way, I'm talking about New Orleans, Louisiana, by the way, but it's been recognized. As well as this ranks as among the middle-class jobs, which is important for New Orleans. And more importantly, aspirational. It's a city that doesn't have a lot of assets, but more importantly, is being recognized as something that could inspire others. Recently, a report came out that the entrepreneurial activity is 56% above the national average. So the number of people starting ventures is well above the average and from aspirational cities. So something special is going on. And we have entrepreneurs. For the first time, I think, in 200 years, there's actually a cluster of new entrepreneurs who are coming together. And what you're going to see is a group of not just technology, but food, music, naked pizza. If you different types of concepts. That's a naked pizza. Avocar was one of them that actually I saw just funded. But in terms of, it's not just one, it's many. It's like we're planting a bunch of seeds. But it wasn't always this way. So I want to give you a quick background that this is not normal. This was a dream in a bar 15 years ago. And to give you a quick background, in my dinner last night, Mona, I learned a little bit how we're connected a little bit. But in a quick history, New Orleans is about to celebrate its 300th birthday in 2018. And New Orleans was founded in 1718 in a swamp. And it was a crazy idea to build a city in a swamp, but it was very entrepreneurial. And there's a guy named Bienville who brought diversity into New Orleans and created this beautiful city in the South. And in the 1800s, you actually had food and Louis Armstrong jazz, and you had the port create the second wave. So New Orleans was very entrepreneurial all the way through 1960. Became the leading in the South. We were the Paris of the New World. It was an amazing place, but something happened in 1960. 250,000 people left. And like any community, there was complacency. People thought we had succeeded. Things were great. People were making money. The oil industry was booming, but the entrepreneurs were 200 years ago. This was their children and grandchildren, and they basically decided to become complacent. So in this time, you had 250,000 people leave. We became the worst state in the country for education. We gave up on our kids and basically started cycling down. Kids were leaving. We became the murder capital of the country, the worst place for murders, and became a dangerous place to live. And this is we had a football team called the Saints, the worst team in the league at the time. No, they never won. But the worst part about this is that it was okay. That our community started to say it was okay to lose. And I grew up, I'm a Saints fan, love it to death. I grew up never seeing a winning season. And we never thought we could win as a community. And they'd be up by 21 points, and we thought they were going to lose, and they did. But there's a culture of complacency and losing that over 40 years was building and building and building and building a community that basically kids were leaving. So the bottom of the thing is when in 1980 the oil industry dropped, and our parents said, get out. So this is not a Katrina story, by the way. It's over. And the city was declining and going down the tubes. New Orleans was basically, in 1940, leading the South of Atlanta, Dallas, and Houston. By the end, we were the bottom. So if New Orleans were a company or a community, it was declining. And basically, people called it dead in 2000. So 5 of us went to a bar. That's how it started. We all moved home. For some strange reason, we came home starting technology companies. And like I think I heard Ty, it was just 5 guys, and we all had moved home starting technology companies, and we were competing. And we really didn't like each other because we were taking each other's clients, and we're bad-mouthing each other, but we were all from New Orleans, and we moved away. And we literally went to a bar, this place called Low, and started talking about this. And we came to this brilliant conclusion after a couple scotches and vodkas or whatever we do there. We didn't have an education problem. We didn't have a corruption problem, or we didn't have a crime problem. We had a leadership problem. Something happened. The people in the leadership of the city of the last 40 years blew it. On their watch, they blew it. And we need to figure a way how to change that. And the idea of who would be the new leaders crazy enough to come to this city that's going down the tubes. Certainly not the folks with jobs, because you wouldn't come here. There's no place to put your kids. So that's the concept of entrepreneurship. We need entrepreneurial people to look at the city. And, before that, what was the real problem? There was a closed network that existed in New Orleans. New Orleans became an insular community where people were tightening down. And the government, university, and business community had basically become an insular network, did not want change, did not want things differently, and basically was constricting the community. And that's why people were leaving. So how do you break that? And that's where entrepreneurship came up, the power of entrepreneurs. I think that's why you guys are here. And very simply, if we could identify these folks, these crazy people that would actually think they had a great idea, social, non-social, doesn't really matter. If we could support them, and what does that mean? Consulting, capital, therapy, whatever it is, mentorship. And more importantly, if you can keep them in the city, as Mona said, this is not about exits, it's about place-based. If we could keep them in New Orleans, what entrepreneurs do is they find problems and solutions, they raise money, they hire people, those people create revenue, and then they make money. At some point, you have to make money, right? But then the next step is, what do they do with that money? They take that money and they solve the problems. So the idea of Idea Village was actually to create a new generation of leaders through entrepreneurship and a new generation of wealth. Exits are great, but it's what you do with the money. So we started this. We looked at models around the country, and I'm sure you guys are looking at models, Mona, and there's different ways of building ecosystems. There's a classic model of Silicon Valley and Boston, Cambridge, and all the things you guys do. You need great universities, and you need venture capital. Well, New Orleans didn't have that. We didn't have any of that. You actually had an anchor firm model. We had major companies that actually had Fortune 500 companies that would spin out companies. No, we didn't have any of those. We didn't have any Fortune 500 companies whatsoever. You had the event-driven model where people were downsizing, and basically jobs were spinning out. Well, there were no big companies. There was no spin-outs, so that was over. And then you had this great model they call the local hero model. Someone with $1 billion says, let's build an entrepreneurial ecosystem. Well, no one had $1 billion, nor $100 million. So we had no models of how do you build an ecosystem in a city that doesn't have any assets. We didn't have any entrepreneurs, any corporations, any money, worse education, worse crime, and a corrupt political system. Right? So, well.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. So this was our plan. This is our business plan right here. We said this is the way to do it. Is what if we could actually build this new network? And this is why I think I connect with you guys. If we could identify the people in business, government, universities, and find those 42,000 people who left, the young people who left in the mid-'80s, and connect a new movement. And what if this group could actually identify, support, retain entrepreneurial talent? We could start to, it'd be like a Trojan horse strategy. We could start to build this new community that wanted to do this, but it had to be new. And so we called it an Idea Village. So the way that we really started, this was the entrepreneurial community in 2000. There were 8 of us, I think. 5 connected through the Idea Village. And we took this plan about entrepreneurship, exactly what you're doing. He had to create an independent entity and network, and we brought the head of the chamber. And we thought the chamber should do this because they're head of economic development. So the day the Idea Village started, so I sat down with this guy, let's call him Bob. And I said, Bob, would you consider supporting entrepreneurship? You're a big business leader. And he said, we don't have any money for that. I said, well, okay, fine, we'll raise the money. Do you have any space we could hang out in your office? He says, we don't have any space. So the day the Idea Village started is when I actually asked Bob, would you just endorse entrepreneurship and just say it's great? And he said, let me think about it. I said, what exactly you got to think about? Entrepreneurship, jobs, all this crazy stuff. And he looked at me, and he'd been there for 17 years, and this organization had been around for 100. He goes, Tim, what if it fails? What if your idea fails and we endorse it? And so that was the day the Idea Village started, because we picked a fight with Bob. And we went out to the community and said, we found the problem. It's Bob, and he should go. And so we looked around the community, and you had all these resources, and it was grassroots. And our job is we're going to go to the universities, the government, the business community, the investors, the professionals, and they're not going to collaborate or get this. We're going to take an entrepreneur and bring it to them. So one by one, we went to the business community and law firms and said, you got to help this person. Or went to the government and developed programs. You went to the universities who didn't have anything for entrepreneurs and started getting them to do it. But it was about bringing these folks into this ecosystem, because the problem is they didn't know what to do. They'd never helped entrepreneurs for 150 years. So we started building this network, and all of a sudden the entrepreneurs started developing skills, and they started developing programs and understanding this. Lawyers realized I can get money out of this, and bankers realized I can fund it, but they didn't really know how to help. But you start building a critical mass of effort. Now they're starting to see some critical mass here. And then Katrina hit, we started to scale this network. So the first time in the history, I think in the last 150 years, what New Orleans has is a connective tissue that connects the business, the government, the universities, the banks, the investors in this cohesive network. And we frame out just like what you're doing. It's this network. So if you're an entrepreneur in New Orleans, you're one person away from anybody. And the value is actually the expats that don't live there. Silicon Valley, New York, Boston, and such. So the Idea Village is basically, we're founded in 2000. We're an independent 501c3 nonprofit. No one owns us or controls us, which means no one really funds us. So we actually have an independent funding stream that no one tells us what to do, but we've been able to build a diverse network of resources. And there's 5 phases of development. There's the startup phase where everybody thinks you're crazy. Secondarily, there's a testing phase where you try things. The third phase, and I'll call it the Katrina phase, you need some event to scale it. You don't need a hurricane that kills your city, but you need something to activate this network. The fourth phase is about organizing this network in a way that there's rhythm and rituals. And the fifth phase, where we're starting to go into, is how do you sustain it? How do you sustain a network where it's not just about coming together? Since 2009, and this is not Katrina numbers, we've engaged about 5,000 people in this network to be activated on an annual basis. We've worked with about 3,400 entrepreneurs, and we've selected about 149 into our program, which is an accelerated program, a little bit like RISE is. The best thing I love, 86% is still in business, and 87% have secured some type of capital, about $58 million. They've created about 1,100 jobs and $87 million in revenue. But 91% is still in New Orleans. So for the first time, we have this network of groups that are starting to succeed and win. We organize this, and you guys might, whether it makes sense or not, New Orleans is a city of seasons. We have a Mardi Gras season, a Saints season, a hurricane season. There's a rhythm and rituals of how we connect. So we created an entrepreneur season to basically create roles for everybody in the community about how to organize and connect to entrepreneurs. Because the entrepreneurs are the only ones who do it every day. But bankers and lawyers and CEOs and mayors don't do it every day. So you have to organize it. So each July we kick it off. We're kicking it off for 2 weeks. From October to March, we do our education workshops, we do our consulting programs, our accelerators, all the stuff that you guys are doing. Then it culminates in March. In March is New Orleans Entrepreneur Week, which Mona came to, and that's when all the networks come together. And that's when all the folks come together and celebrate, and we launch all the efforts. And then we evaluate and plan to do it again. But the idea of the rhythm and rituals. If you're programming a global network, you got to tell them when to come in and when to engage, and it's starting to scale. It's also the way all the partners come in. So Idea Village has become a platform for all the partners in the city of New Orleans to connect. And it's like micro crews connect into the season, and we start to leverage ourselves. So it's not just about Idea Village, it's about the ecosystem coming together and working together. Final day of Entrepreneur Week is where we bring everyone together. And really last year was remarkable, about 6,100 people throughout the season. We did 220 different events, allocated about $2.2 million in resources. But what I loved about this, 26 organizations plugged into Entrepreneur Week. So the reason why it's scaling, because everybody feels part of it. And so how do you connect the ecosystem to work together? Twitter, we had 15.866 million Twitter impressions. I think that's cool. But the idea there's a network effect happening here. So I don't know what's happening down there, but there's something going on. And I just wanted to end on a couple thoughts about how do you build an ecosystem. As I said, I am not a PhD, so what I'm about to say is just my thoughts. But I Googled this. So if you Google ecosystems, they got all these cool charts. You know, they have this thing, then you have this thing, and that one, right? And then you have this one all circular around, and this one, which is more three-dimensional, looking cool. And this one is sort of a nice artistic, now you're getting rid of the plane. And then this one's really cool, sort of, but. And then I love this one where the guys sort of measured it out. And then you got, scaling, right? So if you look at all these things, it's basically about diverse networks connecting. I mean, ecosystems, let's just cut all the baloney. It's about connecting diverse networks. What you're trying to do is connect diverse networks and make them work together. Very, very hard. So that's what you're trying to do here, and it takes time and effort. Where we are is, how do you sustain those connections? And how do you sustain it for generations? And that's something we think about, because what if you guys do this today and go home and it doesn't work again, it's never going to be sustainable. So how do you do this where it becomes part of what you do? And what keeps me up at night is, this is my daughter who started this is her first business. How do you create something that our kids, for 40 years, this will be here for her? Entrepreneur Week is awesome in this season, but how do you make it? So we looked around the world for models of show me a model where the community connects and they do it for over 100 years, right? How do you sustain something for 100 years? And it was hard to find things around the world that have done that, where communities connect on the rhythm and rituals. But we found something that has done it, and it's in our backyard, Mardi Gras. When you think of Mardi Gras, I bet I know what you're thinking about. But Mardi Gras has been going on for over 200 years. It's a platform for community engagement, and it's something that has become part of our culture. And it's part of what we do. And there's reasons why. No one owns it. Mardi Gras is just a name. No one owns Mardi Gras. It's just a name that someone made up, but you can't control it, but it's owned by the city. And everyone feels a part of it. It's all driven by grassroots leadership. There's 129 different organizations, nonprofits, that self-fund themselves to connect into this Mardi Gras platform. And they organize themselves around this seasonal thing, but no one can control it, and there are all these diverse communities connecting into it. They're all about crews and micro crews. And I'm very committed. I really believe it. You can't bring everyone together, but you can bring a bunch of small groups together. So very vertical micro crews, and there's diversity in that. The only way you sustain an ecosystem is diversity needs to connect. And so what Mardi Gras has is these micro crews, white, black, green, yellow, the dancing guys, but you have these vertical crews that connect, and they connect in a way that there's a rhythm and rituals to this. And it's all about rhythm and rituals and patterns. And there's a rhythm and rituals to how you work together. And each year it kicks off at the same time. People organize themselves. And on Mardi Gras Day, everybody in New Orleans shows up, and then 1 million people from around the world show up. And we've been doing that for 200 years. Rhythm and rituals and patterns. And then Mardi Gras is a platform that brings everybody together. So there's something about creating a way for micro crews to connect, rhythm and rituals. And if you're engaging a diaspora of folks around the world, you got to create patterns of when they do it. We'll have 5,000 people there last year. Next year we'll have 10,000. I think by 2018 we'll have 100,000 people coming to New Orleans because they're starting to plan it and understand it because it's rhythm and rituals. And more importantly, everyone has a role. If you're going to do this, everybody in the community needs to have a role in building an entrepreneurial ecosystem, whether you're a doctor, lawyer, investor, or kid, because that's the only way you're going to sustain it if everybody feels part of it. So to summarize, if you're going to build an ecosystem, which is really hard, it's going to take decades to sustain it, make sure no one owns this thing. It has to be owned by the community. You got to look for your grassroots leaders. You have to encourage diversity. Install rhythm and rituals. Provide a platform to connect, where the broad community can connect. And make sure everyone's got a role in it, that figure out where everyone gets involved. If my daughter wants to come and get involved, somehow she believes there's really an entrepreneur season in the city of New Orleans, and she believes the week is just like Mardi Gras. It's after Mardi Gras. But how does everyone feel part of it? And lastly, it's like starting a parade. This is, the final pitch of Entrepreneur Week. We had about 3,000 people show up. It's a crazy thing, but Mona, when you said, what does it take? It takes someone like you to start it. And if you start it and you build a group, and all of a sudden, half the people, or 90% of people say it's never going to work, but if you keep doing it and doing it, people start joining the parade. And then eventually it starts to scale. So thank you.